Listen closely, because the world that existed yesterday may not be the same world waking up today. For days, there was silence. Heavy silence. The kind that makes diplomats nervous and generals stare at maps late into the night. And then suddenly, that silence broke. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stepped in front of the cameras and confirmed what the world had been watching unfold in real time: massive strikes deep inside Iran. But what he revealed next was far more unsettling than the explosions themselves. He didn't just confirm that the bombs fell. He revealed why they had to fall right now. And according to Netanyahu, the reason comes down to one terrifying phrase: a race against time. Because intelligence agencies had concluded something alarming. Iran was digging. Not just building facilities. Not just expanding infrastructure. They were digging deep underground. Massive fortified bunker systems. Hardened installations buried beneath layers of reinforced rock and concrete. Structures designed to make nuclear facilities completely untouchable. Once completed, Netanyahu warned, those facilities would have been beyond the reach of any conventional strike on Earth. In other words, if action didn't happen now, it might never happen again. The window was closing. And according to Israeli officials, it was closing fast. But the story doesn't stop there. Because Netanyahu's comments hinted at something even bigger. Something far more destabilizing. Stopping a nuclear program was only one part of the equation. The other part? Crippling the leadership structure of the Iranian regime itself. In his remarks, Netanyahu suggested that the strikes were designed to hit not only infrastructure, but the command structure behind it. Military leadership, strategic planners, key figures inside the system. And that possibility sent shockwaves through intelligence communities around the world. Because when the leadership of a nation suddenly disappears, hides, or loses control, something dangerous happens. The chain of command begins to fracture. Orders become unclear. Decisions become chaotic. And in regions already sitting on decades of tension, chaos spreads fast. Now, take a step back and look at the map. Right next to Iran sit some of the most important shipping lanes on the planet. Oil routes that power entire economies. Energy corridors that keep factories running, homes heated, and global markets stable. If instability spills into those waters, the consequences ripple far beyond the Middle East. Gas prices rise. Energy markets panic. Shipping routes tighten. And global supply chains begin to shake. This is why leaders across Europe, Asia, and North America suddenly found themselves in emergency meetings behind closed doors. Because even if the strike achieved its immediate objective, the shockwaves may only be beginning. But the most unsettling part of this story might not involve missiles at all. It might involve something much quieter. Something far less visible. Because when a powerful state is struck directly and cannot easily respond in the same arena, it often looks for another battlefield. A softer battlefield. Cyber warfare. Digital sabotage. Infrastructure attacks. Think about the systems that quietly run modern life. Banking networks. Power grids. Communication systems. Transportation infrastructure. Now imagine those systems becoming targets. Security experts have warned for years that cyber warfare would likely become the next major front in geopolitical conflicts. And moments like this are exactly the kind of scenario they worry about. A direct military confrontation triggering a wave of digital retaliation. The kind that doesn't involve missiles or fighter jets, but instead appears quietly, unexpectedly, inside the systems we rely on every day. Banks freezing transactions. Energy grids experiencing sudden outages. Transportation networks shutting down. A war that most people would never see coming. But there is another layer to this unfolding situation. Inside Iran itself. For decades, The Iranian population has lived under a tightly controlled political system. Protest movements have risen before, only to be suppressed. But moments of external pressure sometimes change internal dynamics. When a government suddenly faces threats from outside and pressure from inside its own population, the situation becomes extremely volatile. Because the leadership must divide its attention. Do they focus on external military threats or internal unrest? History shows that regimes caught between those two pressures often struggle to maintain control. And that possibility is what has many analysts watching the streets of Iranian cities just as closely as they watch the skies. Because if instability spreads internally, the consequences could reshape the entire region. Mass protests, political fractures, refugee movements across borders, regional power shifts, and potentially a prolonged period of uncertainty. But perhaps the most important consequence of these strikes lies in something larger, something global. For years, the world relied on a fragile system of diplomacy to manage nuclear tensions, negotiations, sanctions, international inspections. But what the recent strikes may signal is something far more dramatic. The end of that diplomatic era. Because if a fortified nuclear program can be destroyed from the air in a matter of hours, every nation developing similar programs has just received a message. A loud one. And that message is simple. No underground facility is truly safe. That realization could trigger something extremely dangerous. A new global arms race. Countries racing to harden their defenses, accelerate weapons programs, strengthen military capabilities. Because once one nation demonstrates the willingness to strike preemptively, the strategic calculations of every other nation begin to change. And that is why intelligence agencies across the world are now watching closely. Because this moment might not simply be another chapter in Middle Eastern conflict. It might represent the beginning of a much larger geopolitical shift. A shift where warfare is no longer confined to distant battlefields. Where conflict spreads into cyber networks, energy systems, global supply chains, and everyday life. And that may be the most unsettling takeaway from Netanyahu's statement. The strikes may have neutralized an immediate threat, but they may also have opened the door to an entirely new phase of global instability. One where retaliation comes quiet, where alliances begin to shift, and where the next escalation may not arrive with warning sirens, but instead appear silently inside the systems that power the modern world. The silence has now been broken. The question is what happens next. Because in moments like this, history rarely moves slowly. Sometimes, it accelerates all at once. And the world may already be entering that moment right now.